You know what's funny? For 8 weeks, a grown man parked a $60,000 car across my driveway like it was his own private garage. And for 8 weeks, I never raised my voice once. Not one time. I didn't have to, because by the time I was done, that car wasn't just towed, it was gone at the exact moment he needed it most, in front of the one person he was trying hardest to impress. My name's James. I'm an accountant. And if there's one thing 30 years of accounting teaches you, it's this. Everybody's books catch up with them eventually. Brad's just happened to catch up on a Wednesday night in a blazer that cost more than his manners. Stick with me. This one's got a mother's missed heart appointment, a stranger named Hank with a very quiet tow truck, and an ending that got more views on our neighborhood app than the fire department's own 4th of July video. But it starts somewhere a lot quieter than that. I've lived at 214 Oak Street for 15 years. Bought the house with my wife Margaret back when the maple out front was just a stick with 3 leaves on it. It's taller than the roofline now. She used to say she'd know we'd really made it as a neighborhood once that tree gave us real shade in August. She got her shade. She just isn't here to sit under it. Margaret passed 2 years ago this spring. Heart. Fast, they told me, which is supposed to be a comfort, I guess, and some days it is. I still keep her coffee mug on the second shelf, the one with the chipped handle, because throwing it out felt like one more thing leaving the house that I wasn't ready to lose. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because it matters for what comes later. After Margaret died, I did what accountants do when the rest of life stops making sense. I leaned into the one thing that's still balanced. Numbers, columns, 2 sides of a ledger that always have to match by the end. And I brought my mother, Eleanor, closer. She's 79, sharp as anything, still does the crossword in pen, but her heart's been giving her trouble the last few years. A rhythm thing, the doctors call it. Nothing that can't be managed, as long as she doesn't miss her appointments. I drive her myself, every 6 weeks, rain or shine, to Dr. Whitcomb's cardiology office on the other side of town. It's become our thing. She brings peppermints, I bring the truck. That's the life I had going into that spring. Quiet, orderly. A street with 2 lanes, a maple tree taller than my roof, and a driveway I never once had to think about. Then, the rental next door got a new tenant. I remember the exact day the moving truck showed up, because it blocked the street for 2 hours and nobody complained. That's how quiet Oak Street was back then. I walked over with a plate of Margaret's oatmeal cookies, because that's just what you do for a new neighbor. He answered the door in a suit that still had the fold lines from the packaging, introduced himself as Brad. Youngish, 30, maybe 32, good teeth, a watch that cost more than my first car. Man, I love this street, he told me, looking past me at the houses, not really at me. Feels like the kind of place where houses are about to be worth something. Then he laughed, like he'd made a joke, and I laughed, because you do that with new neighbors. I didn't think much of it at the time. He asked me what I did. I told him 30 years in accounting, mostly small business audits. He nodded, not really listening, and told me he was in sales, high-ticket stuff, closings mostly, and that he was between deals right now, building momentum. He said it the way people say things they've practiced saying. I noticed his BMW parked out front, brand new plates, detailed to a shine. And I noticed, just for a second, And I didn't think anything of it then, that he glanced at it twice while we talked, like he needed to check it was still there, still real. I went home, told Margaret's picture on the mantel out of habit. New neighbor, seems fine. I had no idea that seems fine was about to cost me 8 weeks of my life, my mother a doctor's appointment, and Brad a very expensive Wednesday night. For the first month, things were fine, better than fine. Brad waved when he saw me watering the hydrangeas. He complimented my truck once, said it was a real man's vehicle, which I took as a compliment mostly. Eleanor even met him once, out getting her mail, and she came back saying, "He's got nice manners for someone who smells like a cologne counter." I had her appointment marked on the calendar in the kitchen, the way I always do. 6 weeks out, Dr. Whitcomb's office, 9:15 a.m., first Saturday. I remember circling it in red, same as always, thinking nothing of it, just another appointment in a life that for the first time in 2 years felt like it was finding its rhythm again. Then the BMW started sleeping across my driveway instead of front of Brad's house. The first time, I honestly thought it was a mistake. People misjudge angles. I walked over, knocked, and Brad answered in his bathrobe, an Apple Watch flashing on his wrist like it was announcing something important. "Oh, hey man. Yeah, that's me. Just waiting on a delivery, didn't want to lose the spot." "Don't be that guy. It's a shared street." "It's a shared street, Brad," I said, keeping my voice level, the way I would in a client meeting when a number didn't add up and I needed the room calm. "But that's a private driveway." He waved a hand. "Relax, I'll move it. Give me a sec." That sec was 40 minutes. I stood in my own front yard in the June heat, waiting to back my truck out to buy fence stain, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, not since audits gone wrong, since a client caught cooking books and looking me dead in the eye and lying anyway. That particular flavor of frustration you get when someone simply decides the truth doesn't apply to them. I didn't say anything else that day. I went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and did what I always do when something bothers me and I don't yet know why. I wrote it down. Date, time, 40 minutes. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first entry in a file that was about to get very, very thick. I want to be clear about something because I think it matters. I never yelled at Brad, not once, not that day, not any day after. 30 years in accounting teaches you that the person who raises their voice first has already lost the room. So instead, that same week, I did something quieter. I pulled up our city's municipal code online, just skimmed it really, nothing deep yet, looking for anything about driveway obstruction. I didn't find much, a vague line about unreasonable interference, no real teeth to it. I made a note, filed it, moved on with my week. It happened again 4 days later, then again the following Tuesday. Each time a knock, a wave of the hand, a "give me a sec" that stretched into half an hour or more. Each time I wrote it down, not out of anger, out of habit. It's what I do. 2 columns, date on one side, what happened on the other, waiting for them to add up to something. Eleanor noticed I'd gotten quiet at Sunday dinner. "You're doing your accountant face," she told me, pointing a fork at me. "The one you get when a number's wrong and you haven't found out why yet." She wasn't wrong. I just didn't know how badly the numbers were about to be wrong, or how close it would come to costing her something a lot more important than a parking spot. That Saturday was the one circled in red on my kitchen calendar. 9:15 a.m. Dr. Whitcomb's. Eleanor had her good blouse on, the blue one, and her peppermints in her purse, same as always. We had 20 minutes to get across town, which was exactly enough time, not a minute more. The BMW was sitting sideways across my driveway. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Through the front window, I could see Brad on the couch, headset on, thumbs going on a controller, laughing at something only he could hear. I'd banged on the glass. Nothing. He didn't even turn his head. Eleanor was already in the truck, watching me through the windshield, her hands folded in her lap, the way she does when she's trying not to worry me. I remember the exact look on her face. Not panic, just patience running out quietly, the same as wine. I ended up calling her an Uber, stood in my own driveway, and watched a stranger's sedan take my mother to her cardiologist's appointment, while my truck sat trapped behind a BMW belonging to a man who was too busy with a video game to walk 15 feet and move his car. She made the appointment with 6 minutes to spare. Dr. Whitcomb said her rhythm was stable, nothing to worry about this time. This time. That evening, I caught Brad getting his mail. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to anymore. Something in me had gone past anger into something quieter and a lot more dangerous. Brad, this is the last time. If that car blocks my drive again, I'm not knocking. I'm calling the city. He actually laughed, a short, loud bark of a laugh, like I'd told a joke at his expense instead of a fact at mine. Call him, man. Good luck. My cousin Vince is a paralegal. He already told me you can't tow a car off a public street without 3 days' notice and a written warning. Red tape's gonna eat you alive, Grandpa. He walked back inside like the conversation was already over, like he'd won something. I stood there in my driveway a long moment, looking at the tire marks he'd left on my mother's patch of grass. And for the first time since Margaret passed, I felt something in me that wasn't grief and wasn't patience either. It was the particular, very specific feeling an accountant gets right before he opens someone's books and starts finding the entries that don't add up. Because Brad had said one thing that Monday that he shouldn't have. He told me to call the city. He had no idea I already knew something about this street that he didn't. Something about why it was never, ever supposed to be blocked at all. Monday morning, I didn't go to work. I called in, told them I had a family matter, which, in a way, was true. I went to the city clerk's office instead. Now, I want to tell you this wasn't some slick one-afternoon triumph. I want to be honest with you because I think that's owed to you at this point in the story. The first 2 hours were nothing. I read through the general parting ordinance, vague language, nothing with teeth, exactly what I'd found online the week before. A clerk named Dolores, who'd clearly seen every flavor of frustrated homeowner walk through that door, told me kindly that obstruction complaints mostly went nowhere unless the fire department was involved. I almost left it there. I really did. I remember standing at the counter, thinking about the 40 minutes I'd already lost, the Uber my mother had to take, and thinking, is this even worth 4 hours of my life? Then Dolores said something almost as an afterthought. Which street did you say you were on? Oak Street. She tilted her head. Oak Street's on the secondary fire route map. Let me pull that binder. And there it was. City Ordinance 412.04. Any vehicle obstructing a private driveway entrance on a designated fire relief route is subject to immediate impoundment, no warning required, if it prevents the property owner's ingress or egress. I read it 3 times. 30 years of auditing books teaches you not to trust the first time a number looks right. But it held up. Oak Street had been added to that map 11 years earlier after a house fire 2 streets over where a fire truck couldn't get through in time. Nobody on the block even remembered it. Brad certainly didn't. I made 2 copies, one for my truck, one for a surveyor I knew from tax season, a fellow named Pete who owed me a favor and who came out that same week to mark with small brass pins the exact legal edge of my driveway, so there'd never be a question of inches. I still hadn't decided what I was going to do with any of it. That decision got made for me 2 days later when somebody knocked on my door I wasn't expecting. I opened the door to a man I'd never met. Mid-30s, golf shirt, a leather folder tucked under one arm like a prop from a courtroom drama. He introduced himself as Vince, Brad's cousin, the paralegal. James, right? He didn't wait for an answer. Look, I'm going to save us both some time. Brad tells me you've been threatening to call the city on him. I want you to know I've reviewed the situation and there is no ordinance in this municipality that permits impoundment of a legally parked vehicle without 72 hours written notice. He said it fast, confident, the way people talk when they've memorized something they don't fully understand. I didn't correct him, not yet. Something told me to just listen. Furthermore, he went on, if you pursue any kind of unauthorized towing action, that's a civil matter. Brad would have every right to sue you for damages plus legal fees. I'd hate to see that happen to a nice older gentleman like yourself. Older gentleman. I felt that one land somewhere under my ribs, quieter than it should have. He left a business card on my porch railing, one of those cheap ones you print yourself, 20 for $5, and walked back to his car without waiting for a reply. I want to tell you I laughed it off. I didn't. That night, I lay awake longer than I had in months, running the numbers, except this time the numbers were fear instead of dollars. What if he's right? What if I do something and it's me who ends up in a courtroom at 58 years old, 2 years a widower, explaining to a judge why I called a stranger with a truck instead of the police? And it got worse before it got better. 2 days after that, I found out from my neighbor, Carla, across the street that someone, she wouldn't say who, but I think we both knew, had posted on the neighborhood app that an older resident on Oak Street is being harassing a young couple and may be a danger to the block. No names, just enough to make 3 separate people give me a strange look at the mailbox that week. Enough that a patrol car actually slowed down in front of my house one evening. The officer just checking, he said, on a report. That's the part nobody tells you about standing up for yourself. It isn't just the person doing wrong to you, it's the quiet cost that comes after. The looks, the doubt, the 2 nights you lie awake wondering if you're the unreasonable one. I almost let it go. I want to be honest about that. I almost decided a driveway wasn't worth what it was starting to cost me. Then Eleanor called me that Thursday, cheerful as anything, to remind me her next cardiology appointment was coming up in 5 weeks. Same time as always, sweetheart. Don't let anything get in the way this time. I hung up the phone, sat at my kitchen table, and looked at Ordinance 412.04 sitting there right in its folder, exactly as true as the day I found it. Vince hadn't reviewed anything. He'd guessed, and guessed wrong, and used my age and my grief and my good manners to bet that I wouldn't check. I checked. That's the whole story of my life, really. I check. I called Pete's surveyor's stamp official. Called the towing company Dolores had recommended. Outfit called Aggressive Recovery. Run by a man named Hank, whose voice sounded like gravel in a blender, and laid the whole thing out for him. Ordinance number, GPS coordinates, photos of the tire marks Pete's pins now framed exactly. You want him gone? Hank asked. I want him gone, I said, but not yet. I want it to matter when it happens.
Hank chuckled. I like the way you think, old-timer. I paid him a retention fee, $200, the best money I spent since I bought my first work truck. And for the next 3 days, I did something that confused Brad more than any argument could have. I stopped complaining entirely. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He started parking even more brazenly, leaving the BMW running out front for 10 minutes at a stretch, glancing at my window like he was waiting for a reaction he wasn't getting. I sat on my porch in the evenings with my thermos of lemon water. Margaret's thermos, actually. The dented steel one she used to bring to my Little League games back when we were young enough to have those. And I just watched. Patient, quiet. The way you wait out a stubborn number in a ledger you know is wrong somewhere if you're willing to sit with it long enough. Wednesday evening, I got my opening. Brad was out front detailing the BMW, shirt sleeves rolled up, phone against his ear, loud as ever. Yeah, babe, pick you up at 7. Booked the rooftop at the Meridian. Gonna do it right tonight. The Meridian's 40 minutes across town. No car, no dinner. I already knew that. At 6:15, he pulled the BMW out of his garage and parked it, sideways, deliberate, right under the street lamp so it would catch the light when his date arrived, directly across my driveway. Didn't want it near the trees further down. Didn't want a bird to so much as look at that paint job. He went back inside to finish getting ready. I picked up my phone and sent Hank one photo and 4 words. Target locked, 15 minutes. Then I sat back down in my lawn chair, opened my thermos, and waited for the sound of an engine that wasn't going to have a single flashing light attached to it.
Hank's truck came around the corner at 6:22. And I want you to understand, this was nothing like the tow trucks you see on television. No yellow lights, no shouting. He disconnected the backup beeper days before, and he rolled the last 30 feet in neutral, letting gravity do the work, the truck's weight settling into place in front of the BMW like it had always belonged there. I stood up from the chair and gave him one nod. He never got out of the cab at first, worked the bed by remote, the steel plate sliding down with a low hiss that the evening crickets swallowed whole. Then he moved, quick for a man his size, sliding soft grip straps and dollies under the tires, careful, surgical because the car sat low and he wasn't about to scrape a single inch of Brad's paint and give him anything to complain about later. 90 seconds. I know because I timed it. Thumb on my phone, the way I used to time compound interest problems for exam prep classes I taught decades ago. And then it was gone. Just a clean rectangle of dry asphalt under the street lamp where a $60,000 car had been. Hank tipped his cap through the window and pulled away, quiet as he'd come. I noticed something I hadn't expected. 2 doors down, Carla's porch light flicked on. Across the street, the Hendersons' curtain moved half an inch. Word travels fast on a street like ours, even before anyone knows exactly what they're watching. I sat back down, took a slow pull of lemon water, and waited for the second act. A cherry-red Uber pulled up right on schedule. Tiffany stepped out looking like she was headed somewhere with a red carpet, heels clicking sharp against the pavement, already sweating a little in the evening heat. Brad came out the front door like he was walking a runway of his own, blazer over his shoulders, shirt open at the collar, cologne I could smell from my porch. "Tiffany, babe, you look incredible." She didn't move, just pointed at the empty rectangle of asphalt. "I thought you said you were picking me up in the Bimmer. Why am I standing in the dirt?" I watched his smile hold for exactly 1 second before it started to slide. He walked to the curb, looked left, looked right, actually stepped into the middle of the street and stared down at the pavement like the car might reappear if he just looked hard enough. "What? No, 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 no."
He was patting his pockets now, clicking a key fob at nothing. No lights, no chirp. Is this a joke? Carla crossed her arms. Because if we're taking an Uber, I could have just stayed in the one I came in. He turned and saw me sitting there. James, where's my car? What did you do? I took my time answering, set the thermos down, looked at him with about as much heat as a Tuesday afternoon. Your car? You mean the one you said was just going to be there for a second? He started toward my porch, loafers clicking too fast on the concrete. Careful, Brad, I said, and for the first time in 8 weeks, I let a little iron into my voice. You're on private property, and as for your car, I saw a flatbed pull away about 10 minutes ago. Big fella, gray beard, looked real professional about it. Behind him, I saw Carla step out onto her porch, arms folded, not saying a word, just watching. The Hendersons' front door cracked open too. Oak Street was paying attention now, in a way it hadn't in 15 years.
You called the city on me? After I told you Vince told you there's no ordinance, I said. There's one. Number 412.04. This street's a designated fire route, Brad. Has been for 11 years. You parked across a fire lane, sideways, for the 8th time in 8 weeks. I told you I wasn't knocking again. I kept my word. Tiffany let out a short, sharp laugh. Wait, you got towed because you were too cheap to use your own garage? It's not. Brad's voice cracked up an octave. It's a legal misunderstanding. Whatever. She was already pulling out her phone, thumb moving fast. The Meridian doesn't hold table for people who show up without a car, Brad. Have fun with your misunderstanding. She didn't look back, walked 20 feet down the sidewalk to wait for her own ride home. Brad stood there in the middle of the street in a $400 blazer that was starting to go dark under the arms. He looked at me like he might actually cry, and for just 1 second, I felt something close to pity. Just 1 second. You ruined my night, man. Over a driveway? No, I said, standing, folding the lawn chair closed. I'm an accountant, Brad. I like it when things add up. You took my mother's appointment. You took 8 weeks of my patience. Tonight, the columns just balanced.
Brad didn't get his car back that night. Oak Street being a designated fire route meant it wasn't going to some friendly municipal lot down the road. It went 20 miles out to a high-security impound facility whose office had closed at 7 o'clock sharp. I spent that evening in my garage with the door wide open, finally changing the oil in my truck, feeling more room in that driveway than I had in 2 months. The next morning, Vince showed up again, folder back under his arm, a little less confident this time. This is an unlawful tow. There's no way this holds up. I didn't argue. I just handed him a photocopy of Ordinance 412.04, the fire route map with Oak Street clearly marked, and Pete's surveyor report showing the exact legal boundary of my driveway down to the inch. He read it standing on my porch, went quiet in a way paralegals apparently aren't trained for, folded the papers back up, muttered something about looking into an appeal, and left. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't even the middle.
Word got back to me through Hank, of all people, a few days later. Turns out, when an impound facility processes a vehicle, they run a standard check. Registration, insurance, the works. Brad's registration had expired 4 months earlier. His insurance had lapsed 6 weeks before that. Hank laughed when he told me.
Kid's been driving around uninsured for a month and a half in a car he can't even really afford the payments on. Probably let it slide to cover something else. I didn't ask what. I had a guess. That little discovery didn't just cost Brad a release fee. It triggered a separate citation, operating an unregistered, uninsured vehicle. The kind that isn't a fine you pay online. The kind that requires you to show up in person in front of a judge and explain yourself. I wasn't there for that hearing, but Dolores at the clerk's office, who by now considered me something like a regular, mentioned that a young man in a very nice blazer had looked considerably less confident standing in front of the bench than he had standing in my driveway. Here's a layer I hadn't expected. Turns out our city has an ordinance requiring repeat code violations at a rental property to be reported to the property owner on file. Brad's landlord, a quiet, careful man named Mr. Okafor, who I'd only ever waved to twice in 15 years, got a letter in the mail with Brad's name, the ordinance number, and the citation for the uninsured vehicle attached to it. I found out because Mr. Okafor came by my house himself, unannounced, to ask if everything on the letter was accurate. I showed him my file, the same one Vince had already lost an argument with twice. Mr. Okafor read it standing at my kitchen table, quiet for a long moment, then folded it closed and thanked me. 3 days later, Brad got a certified letter of his own. His lease had a clause, standard boilerplate, the kind nobody reads until it matters, stating that repeated municipal violations constituted a breach. Mr. Okafor wasn't evicting him yet, but the letter used a phrase I recognized from 30 years of contract language: final written warning. Somewhere in that week, Brad stopped being just a man who'd lost a parking spot and a dinner reservation. He'd become a man one mistake away from losing his address. I'll give Vince this much. He doesn't give up easy. About 2 weeks after the impound mess, I got served. Actually served, a real process server at my door with a small claims filing. Vince had convinced Brad to sue me. Wrongful impoundment, property damage to the vehicle's undercarriage, emotional distress, if you can believe that phrase showing up in a filing over a parking spot. I almost laughed. Almost. Then I remembered how it had felt, lying awake those 2 nights after his first visit, wondering if I was the unreasonable one. And the laugh didn't come quite as easy. I showed up to that hearing with a folder Vince had never seen the full size of. Ordinance 412.04. Certified copy. The fire route map with the city seal. Pete's surveyor report. Hank's time-stamped photos from the tow. 91 seconds. No marks on the paint, no marks on the undercarriage. And my notebook. Every single date, every single delay, written down in my own hand starting from that very first 40-minute wait back in June. The magistrate didn't take long, dismissed the suit, but it was what she said afterward that I didn't expect. She looked over her glasses at Vince and asked plainly whether he was a licensed attorney in this state. He wasn't. She noted for the record that advising a client on matters of ordinance law and drafting the language of a civil filing might constitute the unauthorized practice of law, and that she'd be forwarding a note to the state paralegal board for review. Vince didn't say a word on his way out of that courtroom. I didn't gloat either. I didn't need to. The numbers were doing that for me. The last layer came almost by accident. Carla, a few weeks later, mentioned that Brada put the BMW up for sale on one of those local buy and sell groups. A friend of hers went to look at it and asked to see the title. There wasn't one. Not a clean one anyway. The car was leased, had been from day one, through a dealership 2 towns over, the kind of arrangement where you're paying for the appearance of owning something you never will. With the insurance lapse, the citation, and the lease company's own review after his file got flagged, Brad wasn't just selling a car, he was handing it back early, at a penalty, to a company that had never really been his to begin with. I thought back to the very first day I met him, the way he glanced at that car twice while we talked, like he needed to check it was still real. Turns out I wasn't wrong to notice, it never was. Priority after hours recovery fee, $450. City fine for obstruction of a private right-of-way, $250. Storage, 3 days at $125, $375. Special low clearance handling fee, $150. Uninsured, unregistered vehicle citation and court costs, just under $600. Early lease termination on the BMW, north of $2,000, according to Carla's friend, though nobody but Brad knows the exact figure. Call it $4,000, give or take, plus a landlord's final warning, plus a small claims judgment that never should have been filed, plus whatever it cost him socially once people up and down Oak Street understood he'd been leasing the appearance of success the whole time. But honestly, the best part was never the money. The best part was Friday afternoon, months earlier now, watching him pull that BMW into his own garage for the first time since he'd moved in, and hearing that door slam shut like something closing for good. Everything after that was just the ledger catching up to what I already knew that evening.
It's been 6 months now. Brad still lives next door. We don't talk. He parks so far down the street some evenings, I joke to Eleanor that he's trying to hide the car in the next zip code. He's careful now, in the particular way people get careful once they've learned, expensively, that rules apply to them too. Carla's Ring camera caught the whole Tiffany scene, as it turns out. The empty driveway, Brad standing in the street patting his pockets. It made its way around the neighborhood app, and then somewhere further than that. More views, someone told me, than the fire department's own 4th of July announcement. I still don't entirely understand how that works, but Eleanor thought it was the funniest thing she'd heard all year. Eleanor, for what it's worth, hasn't missed a single appointment since. Dr. Whitcomb says her rhythm's been steady for 5 checkups running. She still brings peppermints. I still bring the truck. We still circle the date in red on the kitchen calendar, same as always, except now nothing blocks the driveway when it's time to go. I still sit out on the porch most evenings, still use Margaret's old thermos, the dented one, filled with lemon water. People walk by and wave now in a way they didn't before, not because of what happened to Brad, I don't think, but because I think the whole street quietly learned something about patience that summer, about what it looks like when somebody simply refuses to be pushed and refuses to push back with anything louder than the truth.
I think about Vince sometimes too. How confident he sounded standing on my porch that first time. How sure he was that an older man wouldn't check his facts. I wonder how many houses he's tried that on. I wonder how many people just believed him. So I'll ask you the same thing I've been asking myself these past 6 months. If somebody looked you in the eye, called you old-timer, and bet that you were too tired, too polite, or too far past your prime to check the facts for yourself, would you have let it go? Or would you have opened the file, same as I did, and let the truth do the talking instead? That maple out front finally gave us real shade this August. Margaret would have liked that. I sat under it with Eleanor last Sunday, and neither one of us said a word about Brad at all. We didn't need to. Drop a comment and tell me about the Brad on your street. I read every single one. And if there's one thing I've learned at 58 years old, it's that the quietest person on the porch
is usually the one keeping the most careful notes. Stay hydrated, keep your paper trail in order, and never, ever park across a fire route on a Wednesday night.